Howdy, y'all. Welcome to stormy East Texas and video number 21, where we're going to be talking about voting. I was watching this conversation. I think it came out yesterday between Destiny and Alex O'Connor, and felt like I needed to say something. I'm really kind of at a loss for what to talk about lately, so I figured now is as good a time as any to go ahead and listen to some of these folks talking and give what the meat counter narrative would be. Lots of folks do this online, and in a way, it's kind of weak, I admit. I was not invited to the conversation. I'm sort of butting in, and the folks on here, I will give my counter narrative, and they won't be able to respond back. But it's the nature of the times that we live in, and this really is an exercise of learning how the Meek philosophy is applied to common subjects like voting. So we're going to listen to two different segments, and I'll give some brief comments and try and keep this video really, really short, even though they're going to take up about 4 minutes of conversation. So here we go. We'll begin with mostly Destiny.
So in a vacuum where it's an individual actor, I think that you're right. This is almost like a rule versus act utilitarian says it. Like, in a singular event, that if you do this particular thing, yeah, there's no harm, no foul. But then if we understand that that is the case, that if one person could act that way, then on a more abstract level, when all of us are involved, well, now we have a responsibility to make sure that people don't act that way. So if we think that a friend is going to stay home and not vote because they know that their vote doesn't matter, well, we need to bully the fuck out of that person, make sure, hey, you need to get the fuck out and we need to go vote. Like, we have to do this. It's part of our civic duty, our civic responsibility. You can't think that you can get away with not voting because then other people are going to think they're going to get away with voting. Even if that means to take you out the street and kick your ass. We want everybody to know that you have to participate in your democracy.
It's so weird. It's almost like it doesn't make a difference if you don't vote, but if we recognize that fact and act in accordance with it, then it suddenly starts mattering that you don't vote. It's weird. It's so weird to me. I mean,
your vote doesn't matter, but the idea of you voting is everything. That's the issue. And the idea is what carries from person to person, even if an individual might not. If you're sick and you stay home or whatever, that's fine. But if you don't think that you have that obligation, then that's because society is allowing you to think you don't have that obligation. And there's nothing special about you. That means other people think that they don't have the obligation, which means it doesn't work anymore.
This is what morality does so well. It's like...
So, his point that everyone has to vote, otherwise the whole system doesn't work. Therefore, we are morally obligated to vote in a system where he refers to as democracy. Now, I'll go off on how we don't live in a democracy. We have democratically elected representatives. And occasionally you do have some democracy where there'll be a subject that politicians don't want to touch. And so there'll be a referendum and you actually get to directly vote on a law, but that's pretty rare. For the most part, we have the representative government, and they will switch back and forth. So when it's convenient, they use democracy, and when it's convenient, they use representative government. But this, you are obligated to vote. You see, in the United States, we have the consent of the governed. The government is only functional and legitimate when we consent. And so at this point in this time in the conversation, I was really kind of getting upset and be like, hey, y'all are skipping out on consent. But they actually bring up consent. So we're going to go ahead and jump to that, and then we'll finish these thoughts. See if I can do it. I've already messed this up like 3 times. Gotta be right here. Here we go. Consent.
Thought that are like, okay, yeah, the people shouldn't fly the plane, they shouldn't sit in the cockpit, but it should be the passengers who are deciding where the plane's going, right? It probably shouldn't be the pilots who are sort of hired to serve the passengers. The passengers should get final say in the direction of the plane.
Yeah, and most importantly, a lot of philosophy problems, a lot of hypotheticals are actually only challenging because of the way that they're phrased. And if you think for a slight moment, or if you wheel it back a little bit before the hypothetical, the solution can actually come before the problem. So the thing about the plane too is that part of the reason why the plane works and because the people are there is because the people are all somewhat consenting already that when we take off, this is how the decision-making process is going to go. So if you've agreed to it before the plane is off, well, then once you're in the air, whatever process you've agreed to is kind of, as you continue to go along, is what you are consenting to. people say things like, well, how could it possibly be okay that you're doing a thing democratically that 49% of the population might be opposed to? And that's because the 49% are consenting to be ruled by the 51% because they know that on the next vote, they might be part of the 51%. Like a democracy isn't just that we're voting for things that we want, and then when we get what we want, we follow through on them. Democracy means that sometimes we're not going to get what we want, sometimes in excruciating ways, sometimes in horrible ways, or things we really want, but we make those compromises because the only way society works is if we can move along without needing 100% conformity in society for things to move forward.
But the problem famously with political consent is that, for example, being in a democracy, you could say, look, you're in the system. You are consenting to being ruled by the majority by virtue of being in a democracy. But how would I not consent to that? I mean, I guess I could like move, but maybe I'm too young or don't have enough money or something like that. And it's like maybe I don't like democracy, but if I have a chance to vote for how I think the country should be organized, I'm going to do that because that's like my only recourse. But I'd actually rather not be. I don't think it's moral that this is the system that we live in. I mean, is there a meaningful way in which you can rescind that consent?
No, but that type of I think again that's like a juvenile understanding of like positive and negative freedoms. Like if you want, let's say that we created the perfect libertarian escape. Okay, you're born, you turn 18, you're like, you know what? I didn't consent to being in this society at all. I actually would like to enjoy ultimate freedom, and I don't consent to any of this. Okay, and then you push a button, you could be teleported into the middle of an island, and you're all alone, and now you starve to death. And you're like, okay, well, this is bullshit. I don't want to be alone and starve to death. Obviously, this is what I meant. Okay, well, then we'll drop you off on an island with a tribe of people who might capture you and eat you. Okay, well, this is bullshit. I don't like this. Okay, well, like eventually, I think that in all these hypotheticals, depending on when the libertarian catches what you're doing, you're going to basically end up reconstructing some form of like non-consenting government. Because like I said before, even with the tribal stuff, from that book about culture and conflict in the Middle East, like every single, even on a decentralized, absolute freedom, like everybody's able to do exactly what they want kind of structure, every individual person knows that they have an obligation, a decentralized, democratically arrived at obligation to defend their family, their honor, their kinsmen, because if they don't, they're not going to be protected and they're going to be tossed. So there's an illusion sometimes that, well, I don't consent to this government. That's fine, but you have to consent to some form of organization. Human beings aren't islands. We need other people to survive and thrive.
I'll leave it there. Actually change subjects here pretty quickly. And everyone should go and watch this conversation for themselves. Don't take my word out. These two segments are representative of what they were saying, but I think I'm pretty much honed in on it. So what he's saying is you have to vote because it's the only way the system works, and that because the system's already in place, you no longer have the right to consent, or consent is no longer of value. And the answer to that is bullshit. I'm sorry. It's written in the Declaration of Independence that we are a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And the government only is legitimate when we consent. That's it. It's really, really simple. It is base level American philosophy. Government is legitimate when we consent. And you consent every single time you vote. That's it. Like he said, you stop voting, the whole system falls apart. Why? Because they understand that we no longer consent to be governed by these people. Now, we can get into what the point of what government is for, which is literally just for the defending of human rights, which means, of course, there'd be no laws and regulations for the most part. But we're not going to get into that. But this idea that you have to vote and that you don't have a choice, and that we live in some sort of democracy where sometimes everything goes in my direction and sometimes it doesn't. It's all bullshit. The government is only legitimate when we consent, and your consent is measured by your vote. And that's all I have to say on that. So, in this time where we are truly blessed by the powers that be to have 3 amazing candidates, we should be counting our blessings. But if you understand what's truly going on and you are aware, you know the little man is behind the curtain. The system only works when we participate in the system, my friends. I will see you on the next one.